Well, as we are gathered here this morning, there are thousands of athletes around the world who are training this day for the Olympics next year in Rio de Janeiro. And most of those athletes have been training for the Olympics almost their entire lives. I mean, we've all heard stories of whether they be about the gymnast or the swimmer or the figure skater who started training when they were little kids, and how they would have to get up at the crack of dawn and drag themselves in the darkness and the cold to get to the swimming pool or the gym or the ice rink and to train for hours. And then when they came back from school in the afternoon, there were more hours of training. And unlike their peers, they missed out on a lot of things. They didn't get to go to proms and homecomings and dances and parties. And some of them actually had to move away from their family so that they could live closer to an Olympic training facility or a top-notch coach. They made lots of sacrifices over many years, but they had that goal in mind, the Olympics. And certainly athletes aren't the only ones who make sacrifices for a goal. I'm sure you can think of other examples. I'm thinking of a medical student. Somebody who wants to be a doctor has to go through years of study, then years of residency, being on call in a hospital up all hours of the night. Maybe even their spouse has to take on more responsibilities at the home or take on an extra job to pay for medical school. But there's that goal in mind of being a doctor. Now, when we hear these stories, of course, they speak to us about how if you want to achieve something great, it takes sacrifice. And when we hear that, most of us agree with that, and we actually really admire those people. Yet, when we hear that we have to make sacrifices to follow Christ, we've got an issue with that. Most of us take offense at that. That's what today's gospel is all about. Jesus is telling the young man, because the young man has a goal. The young man is saying, I have riches, I follow all of the commandments, but I still don't have what you have. And that's what I want. So what do I have to do to get it? And Jesus says, oh, you have to rid yourself of all your possessions. And the young man can't do that. It's just too hard. It seems impossible. And many of us are like that young man. We follow the commandments. We say, I follow the commandments my whole life. I go to church on Sunday. I'm a really good person. How come I'm not experiencing that life of peace, love, and joy, that rich, full life that Jesus promised? How come I'm not experiencing it? Because you got to go that one extra step. And that's what Jesus tells us. And most of us don't want to hear it. So we kind of walk away like that young man. We're not ready to do that. But what Jesus is calling us to is to say, you must make sacrifices. Just like the Olympic athlete or the medical student, if you want to achieve this greatness. You have to make a sacrifice, and that sacrifice is a human sacrifice. You actually have to sacrifice the self, the false self, the self that places its value on what you look like, or how much money is in your stock portfolio, or what your status in the community is. You've got to sacrifice that so that you can resurrect the truth of your being and who God wants you to be. To me, that's what today's gospel is all about. Now, I recently watched a documentary on Netflix, and it's called God is Bigger Than Elvis. And it's the life story of Dolores Hart. Dolores Hart was a Hollywood starlet in the 1950s and 60s. She's absolutely gorgeous and extremely talented, and she starred in movies opposite handsome leading men like Montgomery Clift and Robin Wagner. And at the height of her career, Universal Studios signed her the leading role opposite Marlon Brando in a movie. But Dolores Hart quit that movie, and she entered a convent and became a cloistered nun. The reason it's called God is Bigger Than Elvis is that Dolores Hart is the person who gave Elvis his first on-screen kiss. Now, everyone in Dolores Hart's life, not only her managers and agents, but also her friends and her family members said, "You are crazy. This is what everybody wants, and you're throwing your life away." And she said, "Yes, I am throwing my life away." And the quote that she gave, I love. She said, "I have left the world I knew in order to re-enter it on a more profound level." I left the world I knew in order to re-enter it on a more profound level. That to me is what Jesus is calling us today. He's saying, you've got to rid yourself of the life you know so that you can re-enter it on a more profound level. Not when we die, in this lifetime, right now. Now, I'll give you another more recent example. There's a young baseball player. His name was Grant Desby. Young, handsome, tall, and in the minor leagues, he was voted most valuable player and was drafted by the Oakland A's, and his starting salary was $500,000 a year. But 2 months after he signed that contract, he quit. And he entered a monastery, and he's now known as Brother Matthew. And Brother Matthew had this to say: "A sincere attempt to be a follower of Jesus requires nothing less than a complete dedication of your entire being." If you really are sincere about being a follower of Jesus, you have to completely dedicate your entire being. It's not just about following the commandments and coming to church on Sunday. Your entire being. You have to want that as much as the Olympic athlete wants that Olympic medal. You've got to have that much passion about it if you're serious about it. That's what it requires. It requires sacrifice. Now, for some reason, we've all come to the understanding that sacrifice is a negative word. And it's not a negative word at all. The word itself, sacrifice, comes from two Latin words. Sacer, which means sacred, and facere, which means to make. So the word sacrifice means to make sacred, to make holy. When you sacrifice, it is so you can become whole. That's what it's about. It's about wholeness. Jesus is saying, rid yourself of your possessions. Rid yourself of all of those things that you think you can't let go of. They actually are possessing you. You have to be willing to let go of those things. You've placed so much value on them. And Jesus is saying, that's not where your treasure is. Put your value on God. So this gospel reading today is not an indictment of the rich or of people who have money or anything like that. We can think of examples of very wealthy people, people like Oprah Winfrey, who are not possessed by their money. Jesus doesn't have a problem with Oprah Winfrey, I guarantee you, okay? It's not saying that wealth is bad. Jesus is talking about what are those things in our life that we've placed so much value on. He's saying you must be willing to let go of those things and remember that your treasure, your value is in God alone. Now, most of us would think of a penny as something that's kind of worthless today. It doesn't have much value or worth to us. But today, when the collection plate is going around, you're going to see that it's full of pennies. And what we would like you to do is, we would like you to take a penny today. And what I'd like you to do with it is I'd like you to bring it home and put it at a place where you're going to see it this week. Maybe on your desk or in your shirt pocket. A place where you're going to come in contact with it. And when you see that penny, I wanted to remind you that that shiny penny is your treasure, is the light of the Christ that you are in possession of. And I wanted to remind you to place your value on the treasure that is already within you. It's part of your DNA. You were gifted with it at birth. It's not in the things you have acquired since then. It's in what you already have. You are already in possession of it. So, I invite you to do that today during the offertory. And I'd like to close with the beautiful words of Jesus when he said, "Wherever your treasure is, there your heart will be also." Namaste.